is Max. My world is fire and blood.
Welcome to the Mad Max AU Timeline Part 2, Rise of the Warlords. In this episode, we will cover the events of nearly 4 years between the movies Mad Max and Road Warrior. Main Force Patrol Sector 26 is the area of Australia that almost all of the Mad Max movies take place in. It's located in the south central region of Australia on the edge of the outback that later becomes the wastelands. Sun City and its surrounding outskirts and suburbs are seen in the first Mad Max movie. The oil refinery and the surrounding area of Highway 9 and Route 30 is seen during the Road Warrior. And Max's family trip to the southern coast to his auntie's villa is also in the first movie. So let's take a look at all of the areas of Sector 26 in the timeline. Starting in 1983 under Main Force Patrol jurisdiction, an Australian Defence Force engineer company set up base camp around the lead mines. And the primary reason they used that for their central location is that's where munitions were made from. The soldiers began fortifying the water station and oil facility and built the guarded settlements of Whiskey Villa and Oscartown for the workers and their families. Also, the combat engineer trained and armed the employees to be used as auxiliary defense units of the facilities, so they would assist in the already thinly stretched Main Force Patrol troopers. 3 years later, in 1986, martial law is declared. MFP is now under military command. And in the following years of the Water Wars, the new Australia Kingdom nation state is formed out of the faltering Commonwealth remnants. All sector defense forces are ordered to withdraw to NAK safe zones off the eastern seaboard and southwest coast of mainland Australia. Power is given. The sector military engineer company sent demolition charges to destroy what remains of their base camp and collapse the munitions mines before they move out, as the Australian nation attempts to consolidate order from chaos. Former MFP troopers and police officers conscripted by the military just drive off and leave the Australian Defence Force units because they refuse to abandon their homes. In this time, the population drops from refugees fleeing to safe zones from 64,000 in 1983 to 24,000 in 1986 and 1987. The sector is a mad dash to control crucial patches of land. Security units are left to fend on their own on the brink of chaos. So who are all the gangs and mercenary groups we see in Road Warrior? When you watch the movie, they look like one big gaggle of a Hells Angels convention. But actually, it's organized groups of different unified gangs. So let's look at the victorious Wasteland Warriors and their leaders. The main factions that fill the void and seize control of the critical areas in the region of lawlessness and chaos. So let's take a look at these mates, shall we? The militia, former MFP troopers and police that abandoned the military fallback because they refused to leave their homes. Commanded by Chief McAfee, they linked up at the Water Fortress settlement where their family members were, along with the employees' conscript guards. The depot was well stocked with supplies, fuel, and ammunition, making it optimized for defense. They also did what they could to keep the water lines flowing to Sun City and the agriculture lands. The only drawback they faced was the fuel and ammunition would only last a year or more, used sparingly. And their area of control was the northeast zone surrounding the water fortress. And next up is the Berserker Skags, the united biker gangs of the area whose creed is survival of the fittest. Their leader Wes rallied them together to raid and pillage anyone unlucky enough to be caught in the open, and they took what they needed by force, using mobility and the speed of fast bikes under cover of night, striking swift like wolf packs, disabling vehicles with primitive but effective weapons of projectiles, crossbows, chains, crowbars, Molotov cocktails, and limited small arms. They had no base as they were constantly on the move, scouting and stalking their prey caught on the wasteland roads. And a lot of these gangs is actually from the first Mad Max movie. And a fun fact, Wes's companion was originally written as his mute adopted son that he rescued from his sister when she died. But of course the audience perceived Blonde Boy and Wes as boyfriends, so it just stuck. And next up is the Metalheads. This faction controls Sun City and its industrial centers. They are a collection of engineers, mechanics, rev heads, urban gangs, and organized crime. They are ruled by the syndicate mob boss Bearclaw and administrator Toady, a master mechanical engineer. They specialize in salvage by rebuilding vehicles and machinery using modified recovery tow rigs to disable and recover other cars and trucks for needed supplies on the surrounding roads, and stripping them or towing them back to the industrial shops. They also have an abundance of parts and supplies left behind in the city by the military and police when it was abandoned. Operating primarily by daylight, they scavenge from the Skag's hunting zones and retrieve wrecked vehicles and machineries that are left behind. And they have a loose bartering trade agreement with the Skags to venture into berserker-controlled roads under the hot sun. And when finding targets of opportunity on the roads, they use heavy trucks and vehicles as battering ram wedges to scatter and disable convoy vehicles. Also, they surround the city's avenues of approaches with vehicle traps, dune pits, and IEDs for any uninvited cars or trucks coming into their patch of land. And now the center theme of Road Warrior, the oil compound Minutemen, that consists of the refinery workers, the Union security, military conscripts, and their family. Their Union leader, Papagallo, and his wife convince the settlement to stay and build a home is a better chance of survival than traveling 500 miles through hostile territory to a safe zone. Heavily fortified with 5 subterranean production levels, the Oscar Town refinery settlement must abandon their outer camps and live inside. They have various trade routes with the Water Fortress and Rock Ridge Pass farmland in Sun City, but the trails are becoming too dangerous for the ever-increasing organized gangs, and they are slowly becoming besieged. The refinery have the largest supply depot, but every trade run costs precious lives, ammunition, and vehicles. So the compound prepares to weather the storm, and their fortress is almost impregnable as long as they protect the gasoline. But the refinery equipment and pump machineries won't last indefinitely, and without replacement parts, the oil production will stop functioning, and holding the trade territory will decimate their manpower. They plan for one last trade dash before retreating inside their walls for goods and abandoning their hard-fought access routes. And now that we've covered the main factions of the Mad Max 1987 verse, let's skim over the smaller ones. The Crazies, or as formerly known as the Mountain Dwellers, were people that herded goats and boar in the Rock Ridge Mountains. And they drive off-road dune buggies to navigate the rocky ridges and hills and valleys that cut in and out of the mountain range. Because of the mass migration of refugees and lack of food, people began consuming their livestock in the hills. Now they violently attack anyone caught in the Rock Ridge Mountains and have been driven to raid the flatlands due to lack of provisions because of their lack of livestock from the refugees. Occasionally, they will hilltop roast captives on pikes as warnings to stay away from the ridges. The Crazies cover their bodies and heads in animal skins and military chemical suits. And even the Skags know better than to encroach on their territory. The saying goes, if you see a crazy, run for it, because few live to tell the tale. And next up in the queue, the mercenaries hold Rock Ridge Pass, the only group the Crazies leave alone because they regulate the traffic between the hills, keeping people out of the mountains. A former military security unit guarding the narrow pass with enough explosives to bury dozens of vehicles with rocks many times over. The Australian Defence Force ordered them to safeguard refugee traffic and keep it secured for when the military reclaims the sector. But after months of no contact or communications, they had to survive on their own. They are heavily armed and charge hefty tolls for those trading between the industrial western sector and the agricultural east, or for refugees fleeing to the eastern seaboards by cutting hundreds of barren desert kilometers off their safe zone journeys. The mercenaries primarily use motocross bikes to quickly traverse the steep rocky terrain on both sides of the pass and strike with explosive force on any intruders. With the firepower, mobility, and tactics that deters any group trying to take the most important strip of land for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. Stepping up to the plate is the Valvoline. Turn your plowshares to swords or pitchforks to horses. Basically armed farmers. With farming settlements on fertile ground to the west of the Rock Ridge Mountains. Most of the men between 17 and 40 were drafted into the military and replaced with conscript female civil service workers, hired and contracted out by the Valvoline Oil Company. Their territory was surrounded by security fences and inner perimeter barriers located in the northwest sector zone. While in the industrial eastern zone, most contract companies and civil service were local males due to the political backlash of mass area countryside drafting, and the practice was switched to a lottery selection. And most of the eastern sector found ways to get out of conscription because they all worked for MSP or the industrial companies. With the conscripted civil service farmers also came the Australian Defence Force Female Home Guard Unit with military training in small arms and ordnance supplies. The Valvoline were on friendly terms with the Rock Ridge military security and were left alone by the Smurg Hill people due to the food rations they provided them monthly. The agricultural lands were safer than the clashing conflict east zone, but they faced problems from small group raiding their crops and immigrants heading east, as it was almost impossible to secure every fence breach at once. In 1987, when Sector 26 was abandoned by the new Australian Kingdom, the Valvoline had to downsize their crop production and focused on harvesting fields around the central settlement to concentrate defensive strength. Although the Valvoline and mercenaries only show up a few times in the first two movies, Mad Max and The Road Warrior, they played a crucial role between the movie years of 1985 and 1989. The Mad Max alternative universe years we covered was mid-1985 to mid-1987. The stage is set for control of the sector. Who will overcome survival of the fittest? The compound factions or the marauding gangs? What is Mad Max doing? Where did the gyro captain come from? And the most unanswered question in the Road Warrior movie, who is Lord Humongous? That and more in Part 3, War for the Wastelands.
Looks like we've got to some gasoline, eh? Hey? Ready out? Huh?
Booby trapped.
Ever seen a man beat the snake before? Who are you? Reflex! Hey, that's too good! Me, I've got brains! Hey!
A fella, a quick fella, might have a weapon over there. I'd have to pin his head to the panel.